You're listening to 17 Carat K-Pop, the show that's a little bit of everything with a K-pop twist. Visit 17caratkpop.weebly.com for more information about the show. That's 17caratkpop.weebly.com. Enjoy the show! So before I get into my Alice in Wonderland related ATEEZ theories and BTS parallels I see and all this other stuff that has to do with the broader themes in ATEEZ's music video universe, first just a quick primer about who ATEEZ is, what they represent, and all of that. So ATEEZ is a group that debuted in 2018. It feels like they've been with us for a lot longer, but it's only been 2 years so far. The name meaning a teenager Z or A to Z, either way. And the members are Hanjun, San, Woo-yeon, Minji, Jeonho, Yosan, Yoonho, and Sunhwa. And their journey starts with All to Zero. With the All to Zero EP, we have the setup with two songs, Pirate King and Treasure. So it starts with the two singles that they debuted with for that first EP were about setting your sights on your journey, basically, and figuring out who's the captain of your ship, who will be crowned the Pirate King, and then figure out how to set sail to find what this treasure is. Key lyric to remember is the place no one has found my treasure. So no one has found it, but you're going to enlist their help anyway and hope that others can help you find it. I'm not going to read the whole monologue that was a part of the intro to that album, but there are a few key lines from it that I do want to say. So these are the actual words in the monologue to this EP intro, but not the whole thing. So I'm skipping around a little because A, it's really long, and B, I can't do justice to the ATEEZ passion and power they put into saying it. I can't copy that. I can't top it. So I won't be going into the monologue and as well as they did, but key moments to understand the story. So the intro monologue is called Long Journey, and here's some key moments. People wonder, people dream about it. It can be different to every individual. It can complete us or it can destroy us. It can change the world. People call it treasure. The sound of wind blowing from the horizon, the warmth of the sun hitting the ocean waves. Please remember the words horizon and waves, side note for later. We're at the starting point of this long journey. We'll never stop. It doesn't matter what you dream for. So let me ask you, what is your treasure? Will you join us? So that's what you listen to when you listen to the EP first. That is your call to action, and then it transitions right into Pirate King with lyrics like, if you want to get on a boat with me, you need a Pirate King, and then the treasure. Then we move on to the next EP, which was 0 to 1. And 0 to 1 is when, in the music video, ATEEZ literally face themselves. So they come face to face with their alter egos, and, well, there's a lot more we're going to get into with that. But the two double singles to know are Hala Hala and Say My Name. These are both pivotal moments for the storyline. Some little hints and, I guess, breadcrumbs that can help us out here lead us to some answers that were given from the ATEEZ members themselves. So this is not just speculation, but as much as we could get some clarity about what the symbols are in the story so far. So Yosan said for a Billboard magazine interview, quote, "Our ATEEZ members meet our Hala Hala selves. This is actually another hint or teaser that this is going to be the beginning of another journey." And then Hanjun followed that up in the same interview by saying, "This is the first time Hala Hala ATEEZ are meeting original ATEEZ." That seems key to keep in mind. Now, we need to talk about Woo-yeon for a second. Not just because he's my bias and we had to have a Woo-yeon appreciation moment at some point during this episode, but for the storyline's sake, keep in mind another key detail here to remember for later is that in the Hala Hala dance practice video, he has this moment at the end where he wipes his mouth and there's like blood left over. It's a very Joker-esque moment, a why so serious kind of moment with the makeup that tells part of the story, I think. So just keep that in mind for later. Another storyline hint that we got was in an episode of their in-app show, The Record, where they said that the song Say My Name is basically supposed to help them represent this tug-of-war concept, and that the masks were there to represent how they can't see who their true enemy is. So basically they're battling with themselves. That much is confirmed, not just fan theory. So they're meeting their alter egos in this part of the saga. And a key lyric to remember here is "Say my name and wake me up from my sleep." So that, yeah, we'll get more into that later. Part 3 of this first trilogy is One to All, and that's when we had Illusion and Wave that seemed to be kind of a summery, lighter, more fun, less heavy comeback, really, in terms of not super deep meaning, but and more just a break in a summer jam that they released. But actually, I do think that those releases were still a key part of this storyline. And I'll explain why later, but just keep in mind those names of those title tracks, Illusion and Wave, that they had. And keep in mind in the video as well, there was a shopping cart that I think is important later in the story. So if you're a little flustered that I keep saying put a pin in that for later, just a quick recap. So keep in mind these words and references that we've had so far. Shopping cart, the Why So Serious Joker moment, a villain moment really is what you need to remember. The concept of waves, the concept of a horizon, a treasure, and a pirate king. So, and the concept of an illusion. So that's what we've got so far. Then we get to All to Action, which was their first full-length album, which starts with the words "Open Your Eyes." And more on that later. This is the pivotal moment with All to Action. This album is when we have the song and video for Wonderland, which goes a lot into my theories, so we're going to get back to that, but a lot to say about the Wonderland part of this saga. Then we had Action to Answer, where we had another key video for the storyline with Answer. Woo Yun talked to Billboard about the meaning of this, and he said, quote, "There is something that's sort of like a teaser in it, but we can't reveal what it is exactly," but he did elaborate a little, just saying that Answer is supposed to have a celebratory feel, and the part of the chorus where they say "Bula Bulo" is call me," and that is a key moment to remember. So they're saying call me" is a key moment to remember. I hope you're drawing the parallel to the Say My Name being a key part of this story as well. There are lyrics in there like 1, 2, 3, let's burn, talking about, letting your flame stay alive, really, and your passion stay alive. Lyrics like "the wave is nothing for us," like no worries about the waves, so we have that reference again. There is a lyric in Pirate King where they talk about raising your hand as high as you can, and now in Answer there's a lyric about raising your glass as high as you can and feeling okay with having it filled up and overflowing. You're really basically meaning like you've found all the riches, and more is the more the better in your treasure, and you can handle it all. Your cups can overflow and you will still handle it, basically. And so basically reaping this wealth and rewards, wealth in every meaning of the term. So there's a lot of symbolism in the Answer video. We have one guy who stands on this clock, which forms the floor. One guy is in a room where it's snowing. We have this dining table scene where the chandelier is broken and on the floor and it's all messy. But at the end of the video, the dining room is put back together. The chandelier is hung back up. It's bright out again, and that is where we end up. So they also meet their alter egos again, and this time they're feasting with them. So basically, we have them facing their alter egos as like a hero versus villain concept, but now in Answer, they're just dining together as friends, basically, with their other versions of themselves at this table. And so keep all of that in mind for now. Last thing to keep in mind from this video is that Woo Yun, my bias, is an important character again, because in Wonderland, he was literally chained up. He was in a lot of chains, and then in this video, he holds on to this giant blue butterfly on his finger, and then eventually in the video, it turns into a bunch of tiny little butterflies flying around, a bunch of babies from this one butterfly. So then we have Outro, which is also called Lawn Journey, which the intro of this whole saga was also called. And in the outro monologue, here's some parts of it. I'm just skipping around a little, but it says, quote, "Look around you. Did you find your treasure? Yes, we have finally found it, covering us like the shining light, Let us continue to hope and yearn. We will be the one. Can you hear those voices? So there is a lot to break down here. Basically, the story went from deciding you had to go find this treasure and having a pirate king to help you with that, figuring out where to direct your sails and things like that. Then on this journey, they met this dark side of themselves. They came to face with their own inner demons in a way, and other obstacles standing in their way that actually were internal obstacles. They were getting in their own way of achieving these goals. Fear and insecurities and such that they were feeling were getting in their way. Hala Hala and Say My Name is all about calling out that stuff and figuring out who you really are and taking ownership of that and pride in that. Then we had Illusion and Wave, where it seemed like just a light reprieve from the storyline, but actually the lyrics and the words used are still super consistent with the rest of the themes, so it just feels like a very intentional detour, but still a detour. And with the quotes like, I'm dreaming, please don't wake me up. So this question about illusions and dreams that we'll get to later. Then we had Wonderland and Answer, where they dine with their other selves. They basically make peace with their other parts of themselves. They're just letting their light burn. And the Woo Yun's character went from being this Joker villain who committed some heinous crime to being locked up for it to being free as he holds onto a butterfly that is also a representation of this freeing feeling. So it feels like they've come to peace with their past and they say they have found the treasure. I also think it's key here to keep in mind the language use of, it starts with, did you find your treasure? And then they say, yes, we have found it. And they continue to talk like that in a way that they seem to be asking questions as if they're asking other people, but then they respond to their own questions with we or another collective term. So they're basically talking about like everyone as one being, whereas their questions are posed as if they're individual and towards you. Like when they say we will be the one, they're talking in a way that is very unifying in response to the part of themselves that is trying to ask them questions that are not about unifying. So interesting dichotomy there to keep in mind. Then, the latest in this story. This will all make sense in a little while, I promise. In the latest that they just released, we have Zero Fever Part 1, and this is all that we have for now, but Fever Part 2 and 3 I'm sure are on the way. But in Fever Part 1 we have a monologue called Dear Diary, which is labeled for July 2016. That is important to keep in mind, that they marked this monologue for their latest release, 2016, whereas this whole saga apparently started in 2018. So I think you know what kind of a time travel concept they're alluding to there, which we will get more into. So the monologue is basically, to paraphrase, it's basically about it's about coming to, it's all a metaphor. It's a little short story about a person who comes face to face with a child who basically asks them questions that cause them to look inward and get in touch again with their own inner child and reconnect with that, and then use that youthful spirit and embrace of the unknown to basically find your treasure in life, find where your future should go. And basically also it addresses the struggles and frustrations that come with feeling like everyone's asking you, do you know your dream yet? Like, okay, now we've let you explore a little and think about it. Now hurry up and, define your fate. And this monologue is kind of about pondering about those thoughts and thinking, well, I don't know for sure yet where I want to go in my life and my future, and why is that an abject moral failure to not know concretely what I want to do for the rest of my life, and why am I defined just on that occupational status or other specific goal I'm working towards? Why am I defined by that as opposed to who I am right now and who I am internally always? So those are the thoughts being grappled with in that diary entry. Then we have the Fever video, where basically it's kind of like a bad dream where they're back into a schoolroom, and the key lyric there is, maybe we're living younger, that's why we're fever. So now we go back to that flame concept and that symbolism of, you're on fire, kind of like a fever, you've got this passion burning within you when you're living younger. So there's that thought about youth, that youthful energy being used for good. And then in the Inception video, Here's where the shopping carts come back into the picture. We see, although I believe that's more for the short film, but in the short film, in the Inception video, there are shopping carts with the basketballs in them. The basketballs are on fire, clearly a symbol of, youth, the games you used to play when you were younger, kind of going up in flames and you feeling like it could all go away with just a puff of smoke. But then we have the shopping cart, which we had in way back in the Illusion and Wave comeback. So a little subtle reference there. There are some other setting and prop themed Easter eggs in this newest edition, as in this latest installment of the story as well, to keep an eye out for. So, and then we have lyrics in Inception like, "You're the dream I can never wake from. Every day and night I'm gonna chase you." I also think it's interesting how they have a lyric that sounds like I'm dreaming a dream, but it also sounds like it could be I'm dream in a dream. So I just think that's an interesting wordplay that may have been intentional, that it sounds like I'm dream in a dream versus dreaming a dream sounds similar, and so it's basically up to each listener to decide what they think it really should be and what makes the most sense to them. But the overall, to say that the Inception storyline is, of course, about this dream versus reality concept, and that's all I'll say about that for now. Other key part that I want to talk about real quick before we get into what all this means is the song One Day at a Time. It's just a really nice song that is super resonant right now in this time, in this year of the world. It's just a message about keep your chin up, we'll meet again someday, and we'll get through this tough time together, and then we're excited to meet up with you again when we can, when this is all over. Super relevant message right now. It's just a really nice song, so just a shout out to One Day at a Time, not for the story's sake, but just because. Alright, so what just happened here? Why is there all this talk of illusion and dreams, and what does it all mean? So there are a few things we need to break down here. First of all, a pirate king. What is the actual definition of a pirate king? A pirate king is basically considered the person who has the most freedom on the sea. So basically the person in the crew who has the most freedom, aka the strongest, whether that be physically or mentally or whatever, but they can help navigate the team better than the others. It's basically a survival of the fittest concept. Who gets to be the pirate king? The word inception also should be clarified. So inception can mean two things. Inception really technically just means the beginning of something. Something's inception. It's the start of something. It's the establishment of a starting point. But the movie definition has a lot more to do with the metaphorical aspects of using the word inception. Refers to implanting an idea into someone's subconscious mind through a dream. So basically making you question what is real and what's not, what was manufactured and what is just concrete reality, how much of your reality is warped, and where do you draw the line between dreams and reality and illusion and concrete things that really did happen, authenticity versus your illusions and imaginations. So those concepts are going to be at play a lot in this storyline. Other key symbols. So these are things that I think stand out, and they haven't been confirmed or anything, just my theories, but there's the horns that is basically, I think, a battle cry of sorts. That seems to be the symbolism there throughout some of the videos. And so what they do with that horn, I think, depending on the video, is a big deal. Like, in the treasure video, the horn is just kind of thrown to the side, like they don't need it anymore, the battle's over. And then in the Say My Name video, Hanjun just drops the horn, which is kind of like a surrender moment as well. It's basically, I think, used to symbolize when the climax is coming. You definitely hear a lot of horns in the Wonderland video, which we have a lot to say about in a minute. Another symbol I noticed, and this one is maybe a little more out there, but in the Say My Name video, Wooyeon has this big, thick fur coat on, and to me, that is the ultimate symbol of, like, wealth, or just the stereotypical rich person who has money to spare, money to throw away, And so I just feel like in the Say My Name video, when they're trying to basically get their confidence back and face their insecurities. It just seems like that was a very intentional style choice for him to wear this fur coat and then be the centerpiece of the choreography to draw attention to that. So just something I noticed. Also, the choreography. What ATEEZ I think has done a lot is they tell part of the story through the choreography. That's why their dance practice videos I think are so important to watch for the story's sake, because they like that moment with Woo Yun and the Joker-esque moment. They have little Easter eggs in those videos as well, so not just the standard music videos, but the dance practice versions. I highly recommend you watch as well. They really help bring the meaning of all of this into clarity, and they're really okay. So here's what I noticed. So we started with the Pirate King choreo, and everything about that seemed very tight. As in physically, they were tightly packed. They had their limbs connected and linked a lot. They basically you need a big group like ATEEZ is to make the dance make any sense. It was a group effort the choreography was very group based. And so you had to rely on each other for that. And they were all kind of tangled up with each other for that choreography. Also key in that choreography, I noticed that they took turns kind of bowing to different members. So in the Pirate King choreo, they would there's one part where Jongho has his fist in the air and everyone else is kind of kneeling a little more, so they're a little shorter than him. And there are other moments like that too where they switch the captain basically and they're all seem to be bowing down to someone else. Like eventually it goes to San after Jongho and that continues. It also seems interesting that they kind of switch places and let each other jump to the front of the choreo, especially with lyrics like "We can make everything together." So basically, they're taking turns deciding who gets to be the captain. So not one of them is taking charge here. And then the key dichotomy I noticed is that in the Wonderland video, they are really spread out by comparison. Their dance is still in line. It still has a lot to do with like group formations looking cool, but at the same time, their limbs aren't intertwined like they were before, if that makes sense. I don't know how best to explain it, but it's just how I interpret dance. It seems like it's like the kind of choreo where you could do it on your own and it would still look like full choreo. It wouldn't look like you needed 7 more people to join you and complete the picture, if that makes sense. So basically they went from Pirate King, where they each relied on each other to tell the story of picking the captain. Now in Wonderland, basically the choreography lends itself to each individual can just do the moves and they don't need to physically lean on other members to show what they're trying to say with the choreo. Just something to keep in mind that I found an interesting transition. So, we have the concept of a flame, we have illusions, horns, fur coats, and other signs of wealth, the choreography that tells a story. Let's look at some more parallels here. If you haven't caught on already to the BTS parallels, we're grappling with this concept with ATEEZ of illusion versus reality and dream worlds and how much of the dream we want to add to the real world or vice versa. If you want to hear a lot more about the theories and the literary references behind this whole dream/reality characterization and concept, that is also in NCT's videos, and it's present in some other K-pop stars' concepts as well, and their storylines. If you want to hear more about all of that, my last episode did discuss this all in detail regarding NCT storylines, talking a lot about how NCT storyline also weaves in the 7 senses and the law of attraction, and there's a whole bunch of concepts I got into in that last episode. So, if you're interested in that, that is where to go for more elaboration, but this is a great way to pick up where we left off that discussion, talking about those dichotomies. So, just to be clear before I go into the BTS parallels, I'm not saying ATEEZ copied them. I love both of their storylines, and I think what's so great about these K-pop video worlds is that they leave a lot up to interpretation. They hint and give you some clues along the way as to what to decipher from their content, but otherwise they let you decide what it means to you. And I just think that's so cool how they take these universal themes and concepts that no one really has ownership of. You can't say anyone stole the idea to talk about youth or passion or drive or anything like that. But they find ways to take those concepts that have been done a million times and really make it their own and personalize it in their storytelling. And so that's what I'm really seeing with these parallels, is just it's cool how they found ways to make these abstract concepts turn into these concrete storylines, which do have a lot of variation, so I'm not saying they copied each other, so just to be clear. But there's some key moments that I think are so similar and tell the story. So first of all, we have the staircase. In the Wonderland video, there's a staircase scene, which we also see in Spring Day. According to dream psychologists who study lucid dreaming and other concepts related to dreams, the meaning of stairs in your dreams represents some sort of journey. So we have the word journey again here, and going up the stairs in your dream symbolizes you're on a positive journey. It's a good omen for your future. Whereas if you go downstairs in the dream, that basically signals you're going to have some personal disappointment and you won't really reach a personal goal that you want to. So in both Spring Day and Wonderland, this concept of longing and trying to reach your dreams is present. We see what looks like they're going upstairs but also downstairs, so mixed messages, but that's the point. I think it's a symbol of their confusion, of their confused state of mind at the moment. Another parallel is we see the sheet symbolism used. So in BTS's Blood, Sweat, and Tears, we had the sheets over Taehyun's head, and then we also have sheets throughout the Answer video for ATEEZ. And there's actually one moment where one of the members runs toward the sheet and jumps through it, and so it looked like it was this thing you couldn't get out of, like a huge life-size cloth, but he jumps through it, and then it looks like a little rag by the time he's on the other side of it. So anyway, so it's a metaphorical way of pulling back the curtains, really, and so it's, according to these same psychologists who study dreams about sheets, about bed sheets like this, symbolize you have a secret, something you want to keep private, something that you're coming to terms with privately. It's basically can symbolize actually personal struggles or something you're trying to hide from the world, which seems super relevant here, especially when we get into talking about the mask concept. So another parallel is the cracked mirror. So BTS has these Black Swan storyline, and ATEEZ also features shards of mirror in their videos. And actually, ATEEZ sees a shard of mirror in the desert, which is where they started this whole story. So they started. So that part is also in the Answer video, and there's the crash chandelier symbol. There are so many more. So I'm gonna speed this up now because I know I've been going on for a while about this. But just notice all those parallels that BTS and ATEEZ both address this. I guess what I'm trying to say is that BTS and understanding the BTS music video world can help you understand where ATEEZ got some of their inspiration, or just what the ATEEZ storyline is also trying to get at in their own way. So, and you know, ATEEZ has credited BTS a lot as being one of their big influences, so makes sense. So the things they share are these concepts really. BTS, the super short summary of what I talked about in the last episode is that BTS's story is all about the parallels of, you know, the dream world versus reality, at least that's part of their huge storyline. But it's really all about those symbols and the dichotomies you draw between different versions of yourself. It's all about putting on a persona and trying to decipher where the authentic you stops and where the artificial stuff that you try to portray to the world begins, and just trying to figure out who you are at your core versus how much you're just trying to keep up appearances. It's basically questioning what the purpose of and your extent of impression management is, and coming face to face with the negative versions of yourself and putting all of yourselves together to understand who you really are. So with all of that in mind, the symbols make a lot more sense. In both sagas, we have the cracked mirror symbolism, we have the staircase symbols, the sheets that show their, you know, they've got secrets that they're working on, personal issues to deal with. We have the dinner table scene that they both have, although ATEEZ has it with their anti-selves as well. Both of them have that, and again, a kind of a symbol of wealth and these riches in your life, with all metaphorical meanings attached to that as part of the set. we also have these hooded figures that are involved in both sagas in a way. Although with ATEEZ, it's really more like you just see the outline of their shadow, and then you see them dressed all in black with the masks and the hats. And with BTS, it's literally a hooded figure. But I think it's the same symbolism, which actually goes back to this mythology concept, I think, that I'll talk about in a different episode. But basically, there's this Norse god called Odin, also goes by Grimni and a bunch of other names, but basically Odin is this guard between two worlds, so it goes with this parallel universes concept here, and deciding where to draw the line between those universes concept, where you have these outlines of these shadow figures that look like an Odin, a guard between the two worlds, so I think that is also what is being represented here. Other key parallel is the question of time travel, where BTS, we kind of have that, but I think the big difference is that with ATEEZ, it's more like, if you could go back in time, what would you change? Whereas with BTS, it's more like questioning if you ever really went back in time. And how do I come to terms with the fact that I didn't and can't reverse what I did before? That's what I think is the main difference in their messaging there, but they do both lean on the time travel concept to speak to larger themes. Last parallel I see, this is really interesting. So there's a part of the ATEEZ Dear Diary monologue, the new monologue that came out, where they use the phrase familiar to me. Now, I was listening to that and thinking, where have I heard that phrase familiar to me? And then I looked back into it and I was like, oh my gosh, BTS started their Wings story with a monologue for Begin. So at the beginning of the intro monologue for the song called Begin is when Namjoon has this monologue where he says that there were two realms, and his parents' realm, quote, was familiar to me in almost every way. Mother and father, love and strictness, model behavior, and school. So, if you recall, that Begin video really sets up a lot of symbolism about identity and trying to distinguish yourself from your parents and come into your own as opposed to just following their lead and doing what they want. So again, it's like with ATEEZ, they have lyrics in that monologue about trying to be like, hey, I want to separate myself from my parents. I don't want them to focus just on who I am in terms of my job success and be defined by my career and let them define my future and my goals for that future. They want to create what their own future looks like. And so they have that, and then in the BTS Begin monologue, they also use the term familiar to me when referring to trying to step out of what's familiar and separate themselves and distinguish themselves from their parents and create their own legacy and their own path in life. So it seems like a little detail that may have been just a coincidence that they're in the same, they both monologues have that phrase familiar to me in them, but I do think that is a very interesting connection there. So, what is all of this getting to? I think there are two big stories that come to mind when I'm thinking about what all of this represents. One is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and the other is Alice in Wonderland. So the first thing is The Alchemist. I won't go too much into it. Frankly, I wasn't a huge fan of the book, but that is just a personal thing for me. I'm just a story-driven reader, and it's a very philosophical book that is not my cup of tea, but it does have a lot of important lessons in it. The bottom line is that, spoiler alert, but here's the ending of The Alchemist, the boy basically learns in the story that after he went on this journey all around the world to try to find something, it was there all along with him. So the whole lesson is that it's not about the destination, it's about your journey in life. And that is clearly the message with ATEEZ, talking about finding their treasure and then realizing no one could find it but me. And then BTS also talked about that a lot and how, with their whole story, they have to come to grips with the fact they can't go back in time and that they don't want to because they don't need to fix anything because they are, their story is perfect as it is, as imperfectly perfect as it is. They have the tools to thrive in life within them already is basically the lesson there. Now, departing from the BTS comparisons and specifically talking about ATEEZ, we have to talk about Wonderland. So, and all of the connections to Alice in Wonderland, because the more I read about the actual context and the themes in Alice in Wonderland, the more I thought that the ATEEZ Wonderland is not at all just coincidentally named. It's not just a song or a video called Wonderland. I think this is a huge reference to so many aspects of the actual Alice in Wonderland story that are intentional. So, now it's time for my total theory part, all speculation, all just my views, not confirmed, but I do think there are a lot of intentional parallels between ATEEZ's world and Wonderland that they drew on for inspiration. So, after you have to listen to this commercial to help me with bills and such, then we will get to that part of the story. In order to really understand the story and the themes within Alice in Wonderland, first you really need to understand the mindset and personality of its author. So, Lewis Carroll, quick background on him. He's actually a very, very interesting character. His full name was Charles Ludwig Dodgson, but he definitely seems like he acts more like a Lewis Carroll, very, very quirky. He was always very focused on keeping in touch with his inner child. He was very fascinated with toys, puppets, dolls, all of that. He really bonded with these, and I don't mean this in a creepy way, although there's some speculation, but he really bonded tightly with this group of young girls after he became friends with their dad, who was the dean at University of Oxford. So actually, Carroll was no dummy. Like, he really had a bizarre tale that gets made fun of a lot with Wonderland, and it's a lot of ludicrousness, but he really was very smart, and he taught math at Christ Church College at University of Oxford. So he became friendly with the dean there and then met his daughters, one of them being Alice Liddell, and Alice would go on to be the inspiration for Alice in Wonderland. So he was kind of like a non-blood relative, really. He was like part of their family, like a second uncle or something for them. So he really bonded with that family and played with those kids. And basically this whole story he came up with and told those girls when they went on a boat ride together on July 4th one year. And so few key things to keep in mind about Lewis Carroll is that, first of all, like I said, he was no dummy. He was interested in both right brain and left brain things. He was very into theatrics and all of those more abstract concepts, but he also was very into math and science and psychology. He did a lot of research just for fun. He wrote 10 different math-themed publications and created a lot that added to the mathematician community. He would visit asylums and set up meetings with psychiatrists, psychologists, all these people in the medical field just to talk to them. He was just fascinated by them. He went to their lectures just for fun. He really just kept those conversations going and was very fascinated with mental illness and studying psychology and things of that nature. He really even implemented some of what he learned that you could see in Victorian era views of the cognitive sciences were part of his fiction writing. So he was very into fiction and nonfiction studies throughout his life. He always tried to blur those lines too. So he basically always mixed what seemed like logic, like math, with his illogic and goofy inner child. So he would come up with these math problems, and he would say things like one problem he came up with was called like the pigs and balloons problem. So he would just name things like that. The problem of grocers and bicycles. So basically it seems like it makes no sense, but that was his form of logic. It was inverted logic, all of it. So he was also very into wordplay, which he kept in his stories as well. So, like, for example, when he wrote math books, he would rank a problem as 1 knot, 2 knot, or 3 knot. And 1 knot meant that was like an easy level problem, 2 knots, medium level, 3 knots, that was a hard problem. And he used that play on words when in the Alice in Wonderland story, she talks at the tea party with the Mad Hatter and all them, and they are saying not, but some of them think they're saying not at K-N-O-T when they're saying N-O-T, so it's just like a play on words, goofy moment. So he had a lot of those in his writing, where in his fiction he would have these little references to his nonfiction writing that unless you were a fan of all of his work, you would not have picked up on. He did continue to give his puzzles and logic concepts all these weird names, like what the tortoise said to Achilles, where he would blend powerful metaphors with totally nonsensical, not deep at all character references and things like that. So that was really who he is. He was a mix of all of these eclectic traits. And in 1862 was when he went on that boat ride on that iconic summer day on the 4th of July with Alice and her sisters. And on that river, he told and created this story about this wonderland that this character Alice fell into. And a key moment to remember is that he actually originally, after telling this story, wrote it and was ready to publish it as Alice's Adventures Underground. So all along, this really was supposed to be, Wonderland was supposed to be an underground world, like an upside down of sorts. So keep that in mind. He also really wanted to focus on the visual aspect of storytelling. He actually drew 40-ish illustrations by hand for the full version, but he was such a perfectionist about his writing that he eventually just hired a caricaturist to do the official illustrations for the published version of this story. And that tells you a lot as well, that he hired a caricaturist to do it, because that added to just the sense of embracing what seems goofy or illogical in this storyline that actually has a lot of logical, sensical themes in it, if you really think about it. So, but they really were a perfectionist duo. So this writer this caricaturist that he hired, actually was also a perfectionist who after hiring him, even after that, he still wasn't satisfied. So they actually had 2,000 copies of the book printed and then scrapped. So they were like, no, never mind. I don't like the pictures as much as I thought, and let's try this again. And they discarded 2,000 copies of this book before they could be published because they just were not satisfied with the pictures. So anyway, the point is that visuals were a key part of telling this story, and it was to him as well as his team, and they really cared about making every image look a very specific way. And so actually, early critics of the book really did focus on those images. They would say things like, this story is a terrible story, it's really weird and blah and nothing, but the illustrations are fantastic. So a lot of the reviews really were like, this is absurd and a bad story, but the pictures are really moving and interesting. So that I find very interesting, that the caricaturist, if it were not for him, this story may have never gotten off the ground. So the super, super, super short SparkNotes version of the original Alice in Wonderland story, mixed with what I recall from the Disney movie that was obviously taking from Lewis Carroll's work. Basically, all of the language used in the concept is supposed to be a dreamlike quality, and then at the end of the movie, Alice wakes up and it was all a dream. So you definitely get that view of it. The story is also told from this omniscient perspective in a way where you get in the minds of every character, really, that is important to remember for later. So basically, Alice sees this rabbit who is running around saying, I'm late for an important date. So she goes to follow him, because if a rabbit says that, you probably want to find out what's going on. So she follows the rabbit, but then she falls down his rabbit hole, and so that's a whole thing. Not relatable. So then, basically, she enters this, once she gets to the bottom of the hole, she's in this room. She's very sad that she is lonely now, so once she grows big, she starts crying, and then she grows small after eating this other thing. It's a long story, but basically after she falls down this hole, she swims away in her own tears and then gets washed into the other part of the world. So after she gets washed through a keyhole, she enters Wonderland. And she basically keeps changing sizes throughout the story as she eats different things that make her grow big or small. She interacts with a lot of characters. You got Tweedledee and Tweedledum, who sang that song to her about the cabbages and the kings. Yeah, it's not supposed to make any sense, so just bear with me. They tell her actually a key story, though, about how there's basically like these oysters got eaten because they were super naive. That's basically the moral of that story, is that curiosity killed the cat. So they tell her a story about that, and then she meets the caterpillar, a blue caterpillar, and he keeps asking her, who are you? And she doesn't know how to answer because she doesn't feel like herself. She meets that Cheshire Cat, who is really a pain in the butt. That Cheshire Cat, really messed with her court trial, and it's a whole thing, but he is really sneaky. Then she went to that tea party, they had the unbirthday singing and all that weirdness, And then she went to see the queen. They're painting the roses red for her. All the playing cards paint the roses because she wants them painted red. She doesn't want them to just get red flowers off the bat. She just likes to be difficult and extra. So the queen's like, fine, go get white flowers, but you have to paint them red later. And so her servants, these playing cards, do that. Then Alice is challenged to a game of croquet with this lady, which the Cheshire Cat keeps making even worse for her, but Alice was already losing because the queen always rigs the game so that she wins. There's a lot there, but that's kind of the summary of it. Then there actually was a sequel called Through the Looking Glass, aka Through the Mirror, basically, is what it means, where Alice falls through the mirror and enters that other world, and basically the same sort of thing happens, where the story is driven by all these weird, quirky characters who are making the journey a lot harder for her, and she basically has to try to logic her way out of a world that seems to lack any logic. And so she tries to do all that on her own, and then actually in Through the Looking Glass 2, she does wake up again. And it was just a dream, but it ends with the quote, "What is life but a daydream?" So again, really that concept of illusion versus reality is definitely at play here. So, with all of that in mind, how the heck does this relate to ATEEZ's story? Not except for the obvious meaning, the title of the song, Wonderland. So, let me break it down. Here are my theories about where the parallels are. And again, just my thoughts, and some of them are such a reach, but you know what? Just let me go out on a limb here and say my thoughts. So, she basically, first of all, she meets Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and they basically tell her a story about how curiosity killed the cat. Now, she's a 7-year-old. She's supposed to be curious. She asks a lot of questions. She's a child. She loves to ask why, and that's who she is. But they basically try to get her to stop and just think logically and not keep asking them questions. Basically, Tweedledee and Tweedledum are basically like a symbol of those adults in your life, the parents that just want their kid to be quiet already, and they're basically telling her to stop being curious, basically trying to hamper down what makes kids, their curiosity, their excitement to learn more about the world and understand what they don't understand yet, their desire to learn more about the world, and that just genuine joy and enthusiasm that comes from the curiosity. They try to hamper all that down. So Tweedledee and Tweedledum are clearly like the embodiment of that parent who's scolding their child for their youthfulness or wanting them to grow up too fast. Clear parallels to ATEEZ's storyline with basically saying these parents are trying to judge me based on my career and things like that, and they won't let me just be a kid. Then we get to the scene where she is crying and she swims away and washes through the keyhole into her own, through her own tears and the waves they formed. There are other moments where she's kind of like sailing and flying, like floating through ocean waves of her own tears that she cried when she was giant. So I know this is a huge reach, but there are a lot of moments where ATEEZ are in water, dancing in water, or they're on a little boat on a river, or on a big pirate ship. But there are a lot of wave references and oceans, and not necessarily a river of tears, but you could draw that parallel. Then she goes to the caterpillar, a blue caterpillar who eventually turns into a blue butterfly. Remember where we saw the blue butterfly? On Woo Yun's finger, after he was freed from his chains, he got to hang out with the butterfly in the Answer in Wonderland world post being chained up. So in the Answer video, he was with that blue butterfly from Alice in Wonderland. And again, that's a relevant point in this story too, where the caterpillar's like, "Who are you?" And Alice is like, "I hardly know actually." And that is basically what ATEEZ's story is all about, is who am I? And trying to figure that out. The Cheshire Cat is just a piece of work. We're not going to spend more time talking about that character. You either love or hate him. The tea party scene. That one, the biggest theme of that scene is when the characters basically lose track of time and they don't know how to control time. So the Mad Hatter has this watch that basically tells him everything but the time. So like he's like, "Oh, it's 2 days early or 2 days late," and all this wacky stuff, like it's this day or this year or whatever, but it won't tell them the actual hour or minute. And so we see that weird what is time and that's warped sense of time through not only ATEEZ's time travel concept, but the fact that one of the members stood on that giant clock on the floor in one of their music videos, in the Wonderland, the Answer video, I believe, just saying the concept of time. They also have lyrics about this compass and symbolism about this compass that they kind of use but kind of don't. So it's like, well, a compass is essentially that messed up watch, right? It's kind of like, well, it's kind of telling me the direction to go, but it's not telling me like what time to get there or anything more specific. So it's helpful, but only to an extent. And that's kind of what the Mad Hatter's watch represents as well. Then, if we go to the scene where Alice sees them painting the roses red, and we've got the queen and the croquet match and everything, and the trial, basically all of that, how that connects to the ATEEZ world, is kind of about the sense of corruption. This queen and her royalty, they rig the game. They basically, then she goes on trial. It's a long story, but the queen has this famous quote, "Sentence first, verdict afterwards," which I think about a lot, where the queen was like, no, sentence first, verdict afterwards. And so definitely feels like a symbol of people jumping to snap judgments about people in society. So basically the queen embodies that sense of someone with wealth who is not using it right, not using their power right, and is really corrupted by power. And that power corrupts concept, might have to do with like the fur coat and other symbols in the ATEEZ world where they're talking about wealth and that thought of what it really means to be rich and wealthy in your life in a symbolic sense, and how that's more important than being being literally wealthy in terms of money. Just something to think about. And then we have Through the Looking Glass, where that whole story is basically going into this alternate universe. And we saw in Wonderland, they basically go through a door into the other side of a world, and they question, what is this but a dream? Is this a dream within a dream? In the song Wonderland, they even have a lyric like breaking the wall, like get through it no matter what. They're trying to get to the other side of the looking glass world. So I would keep that in mind as well. So it has to do with time, with the ocean, the blue butterfly. There's a lot there that I think are intentional parallels. And this whole story really for Alice and ATEEZ is all about the journey, not the destination. So yeah, oddly, Alice in Wonderland also has to do with the alchemist. It's a wild duo to compare, but I think it's accurate to compare them because they're both about, well, it's not about the destination because Alice just woke up. She didn't really have an ending to her story. It's about what you do before you wake up in your dream or whatever. You know what I mean? And so there's this one part actually that I find really funny that reminds me of Dear Diary. So in the Looking Glass story, the sequel, Alice is talking to Humpty Dumpty before he has his great fall. And she says basically that she's 7 years old, and Humpty Dumpty is like, you should stay 7. Like, you don't want to get any older. It gets worse from there. And then she's like, well, I can't help that. She says one cannot help that, and so Humpty Dumpty responds with, but 2 can help. So, like, she's like, one cannot help that, but he's like, 2 can help that. So it's just a weird, funny moment, but again, it has to do with that concept of eternal youth, and what does time even mean? Time and age are but a number, who says you're too old or too young for this or that, and that's really what their conversation has to do with. And that's similar to the ATEEZ Dear Diary monologue, where they're basically like, you know what, maybe we can live younger, maybe one of us can't live younger, but all together, we can all bring out that youthful spirit in each other. There's that sense of togetherness that they show in the videos as well. Another parallel is the telling with visuals, and with BTS as well. These artists really do tell a story through their videos, through the choreography, and other elements that really you have to see to get the full picture of. And so those visuals are a key part of Alice's story as well. I mean, Alice's whole story starts with she's looking at her over her sister's shoulder at her textbook and is like, how can you enjoy that? There are no pictures in that book. And really that sums up the whole Wonderland world, is it's all visual. It also all has to do with the surreal, and actually there are other interpretations of Alice's world that have been drawn over time that really tap into surrealism. Alice in Wonderland was considered a key major inspiration for surrealist painters over time. And so really it's all about the melting down and redefining of what we mean by time. What's too fast, what's too slow, what's your pace in life, what should it be, where are you going, and why does it really matter? It's basically living in the ambiguity and realizing that time is but a number, age is but a number, and just finding your journey by just trusting in the process and the journey, and trusting in just allowing your inner child to stay alive with you, and that is a key to making peace with yourself. So what is the treasure that ATEEZ found through this whole story? I think when they say we found it, what they're talking about is that their treasure is themselves. And the treasure is basically, it was with them all along on this journey. It is their curiosity. It is their innocence, their inner child. It is that willingness to embrace the unknowns in life and ask about them and learn more and take time to decide what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, and how you want to be defined by yourself and by no one else. So I think that is a key aspect of what ATEEZ's story was. So basically, what they did is they basically said, we started with Lawn Journey. So in ATEEZ's Lawn Journey, they're talking about this treasure that is Lawn dreamed about. They rely on each other to figure out how to even get to this treasure. They don't know how to do it. And then on their journey, they have to face their obstacle, which is themselves. Then they still have these basically imposter syndrome moments of what's real, what's not, what's an illusion, what's not. We then get into Wonderland where they're like, you know what, I gotta see for myself, where do we draw the clear line between the world of illusion and the world of reality? And so they try to draw that line. But the answer is Call Me, that lyric about, you know what, just say my name. Let's go back to when I was with every facet of my personality, when I was with my alter ego. Then in that scene, we see the main villain character, Woo-Yun. He's freed, he's with that butterfly, and he's freed because he's with that butterfly who represents that caterpillar who kept asking Alice, who are you really? Who are you really? And that's how he got his freedom, is by letting himself just question who he is. Just letting him question that. Then they asked, did you find your treasure in that outro monologue? And they said, yes, we have finally found it after that butterfly video came out. Then in the next part of the story, we had Fever Part 1, with the Dear Diary entry reflecting on realizing you want to be in touch with your inner child. We have lyrics like, maybe we're living younger, that's why we're fever, talking about that flame of passion. Then we have Inception, where you see childhood memories kind of being burned, and they're worried about that and want to hold on to them again, but realizing that they just will reclaim that inner child over time. Just take it one day at a time, as the song says. They tell this with all of those symbols as they try to face the different sides of themselves and decide which parts of themselves they want to keep in the real world versus which sides they want to reserve for dreams, for not pulling into reality, essentially. So I think that's what this whole thing is about. I think ATEEZ is really trying to lean on a few concepts that Lewis Carroll embodied in their own work, which is the concept of bringing together different worlds and concepts that don't seem to go together. So they're bringing together the concept of youth and accepting getting older. They're bringing together the concepts of logic and illogic, things that are bizarre and quirky with things that are practical. Bringing together, things that bring them respect in society and wealth and things like that with just their unique passion and individuality, even if their parents scoff at it. They're bringing together mischievousness and things like that with the responsibilities of growing up and responsibility to each other. They're bridging the worlds of individuality with group identity. It's all about bridging worlds and blurring boundaries from others. That's what I think is the ultimate the ultimate message of their story. So, what can we expect in the future from ATEEZ then? If their story is a lot of Lewis Carroll like has a lot of Lewis Carroll like elements to it, and side note, the whole ship thing, I forgot to mention this earlier, the whole ship that we see through the ATEEZ series, kind of like the boat ride Lewis Carroll went on when he introduced this whole story to the world in the first place. Anyway, so where that might go from here is, first of all, I would love if it went into a Looking Glass style Alice sequel direction, because I would love to see some sort of chessboard themed maneuvering strategy style short film with ATEEZ. I would love to see them slay a Jabberwocky or something like that. I would love for them to just do a lot more with those characters. Heck, maybe even do something with Humpty Dumpty, that'd be funny. So, I would love that. But I think if they do that, they'll press pause on it and do it later. Because based on the latest short film they released for Fever, I think they basically decided that they woke up. So this first chapter is closed. I think ATEEZ really, through the first trilogy and the follow-up albums, they really explored Wonderland, explored that underground world, the upside down, if you will, and they've come out into the real world with the tools from that wild world, the tools from that world like curiosity and their inner child. They've regained that after spending time there, and now they're ready to use those skills and use them to be successful just on Earth. So I think now they're going to take time away from Wonderland, and they're just in the regular world, not the upside down, the right side up world, or whatever you want to call it. And so I think they're going to take a break from more imaginative, quirky imagery and focus more on just realistic characters in their drama and their storytelling. So that's where I think they're going for now, but I'd love to see them go back into more fantasy elements of their story later. But I just think now that's basically where they're headed. So I would just encourage you to watch the short film, so I won't go into it too much, so that you're more likely to check it out for yourself. But I will say that the key moments in the Fever short film include that they're all in these different settings, one being where birds are literally let out of cages, clear symbolism there. One of them seems to try to be following in his brother's footsteps in this garage band set. One of them is on that basketball court with the shopping carts and the flames and all of that symbolism. We have one of the members who is in an empty classroom again, so we have like that bad school dream back. And then Hanjun has this part where he says, the world in television that cannot be reached, the world that they live in and the world that I live in are blocked from each other. And he says, it's just like see-through glass. Just like see-through glass. Sounds a lot like a Looking Glass reference if you ask me. So just something to keep in mind. Those are all of the connections that I see there, and I could go on, but I'll just say that Lewis Carroll really has impacted a lot more work than you think, and actually made a lot more sense than you think, and a lot more, there are a lot more deeper themes than one might think at first read that go into the story of Alice and what it means to be a kid on an adventure. And that is ultimately what ATEEZ wanted to do, is take us on their adventure and get back in touch with your inner child for that adventure. So that is how I see the ATEEZ storyline. But let me know your thoughts. I'm very curious if you agree or disagree with my interpretations. So talk to 17 Carat K-Pop on our socials for more. And of course, I'll keep you posted on this storyline in the future. The next band-specific episode we'll do will be either BAP or TXT. I have a lot planned and a lot of theories for both of those to get into, as well as other episode content coming your way soon, so stay tuned for all of that. In the meantime, thank you for listening, and I will see you again soon.